On a Friday evening in October, my son's wife looked me in the eye and said, "You need to find yourself a room to rent within 30 days. We're starting a family, and frankly, you're in the way." I'm Elspira Weatherby. I'm 63 years old. I smiled, said, "Of course, dear. I'll start looking tomorrow," and walked out of the kitchen, leaving my homemade lasagna cooling on the counter. But what they didn't know, what Isolde and my son Hugh had somehow never bothered to verify, was that the house they were planning to renovate, the $800,000 property on Maple Street they'd been living in rent-free for 3 years, belonged entirely to me. By the time I was finished, their belongings would be on the curb, and they'd learn a lesson about assumptions that would cost them everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Elspira Ann Weatherby, and I had lived in the house at 847 Maple Street for 37 years. Every corner held a memory that belonged to me alone now. The hallway where Hugh took his first wobbly steps at 11 months old. The garden where my late husband William had planted 32 rose bushes the summer before he died. The oak dining table I'd inherited from my mother, scarred with decades of family dinners, homework sessions, and late-night conversations over tea. William and I bought the house in 1988 for $89,000. We were young then. I was 26, he was 28, and Hugh was just a baby. William worked as an engineer at Lockheed Martin. I was a paralegal at Morrison & Associates, one of Denver's most prestigious law firms. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable, and we were building something together. When William died of a massive heart attack in 2010, 15 years ago now, though some days it feels like yesterday, he left everything to me. The house. His life insurance policy worth $320,000. His pension. His 401k with another $460,000 accumulated over 23 years of steady contributions. I was 48 years old and suddenly alone. Hugh was 17, about to start his senior year of high school. I worked my 2 jobs, paralegal during the day, bookkeeping for a small accounting firm 3 evenings a week, to put him through the University of Colorado. I paid every cent of his tuition, $147,000 over 4 years. I paid his rent, his food, his textbooks. I never asked him to work during school. I wanted him to focus on his studies, to build the future his father and I had dreamed of for him. After graduation, Hugh got his CPA certification and landed a job at Fletcher & Dane Accounting in downtown Denver. Good salary, benefits, a career with prospects. I was so proud. I'd paid off the mortgage on 847 Maple Street in 2008, 2 years before William died. The house was mine, free and clear. Worth, according to the 2023 county assessment, approximately $950,000. Not that I planned to sell. This was my home, my sanctuary, the place where I'd raised my son, mourned my husband, and built my life. I never added Hugh's name to the deed. Some instinct always stopped me when he hinted at it over the years. "Mom, have you thought about estate planning? Maybe we should talk to a lawyer about transferring the house to avoid probate. Or, wouldn't it be easier if my name was on the deed too? You know, just in case something happens." Just in case something happens. I always smiled and said I'd think about it. And then I never did. Thank God for that instinct. When Hugh married Isolde Brennan 3 years ago, November 15th, 2022, a crisp autumn day, I was genuinely happy for him. My son had found love. Isolde was 26 then, beautiful in that effortless way some women have, with honey blonde hair and striking blue eyes. She worked in marketing for a tech startup downtown, dressed in expensive clothes, drove a leased BMW 3 Series. They'd been dating for 18 months. The wedding was small, intimate, just 40 guests at a boutique venue in Boulder. I paid for half, $12,000, because Isolde's parents were struggling financially. Her father was on disability. Her mother worked retail. I didn't mind. I wanted Hugh to have the wedding he wanted, and I wanted to welcome Isolde into our family properly. 2 months after the wedding, they sat me down at my own kitchen table. "Mom," Hugh began, looking uncomfortable, "Isolde and I have been talking. Rent in Denver is insane right now. We're paying $2,300 a month for a one-bedroom apartment, and we're trying to save for a house. We were wondering, could we stay here for a while? Just until we save enough for a down payment? Isolde smiled at me, her hand on Hugh's arm. We'd help with groceries, of course, and utilities. We wouldn't be any trouble, Elspira. We're both working full-time. You'd barely notice us. I looked at my son, at his hopeful face, at the wife he'd chosen. I thought about how big the house was. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, all that space I didn't need. I thought about family, about helping the next generation get started. Stay as long as you need, I said. I imagined cozy evenings together, the 3 of us watching movies in the living room, shared laughter over dinner. Maybe, eventually, grandchildren running through these rooms, filling the house with life again. I imagined a lot of things that never came to pass. The first 6 months were pleasant enough. Isolde was polite, even helpful at times. She'd cook dinner occasionally, chicken piccata, beef stroganoff, once a beautiful coq au vin that reminded me of the French restaurant where William had proposed. We'd sit together in the living room, the 3 of us, while Hugh worked late at the firm during tax season. Isolde would tell me about her campaigns at work, the difficult clients, the office politics. I'd share stories from my paralegal days, the strange cases, the difficult attorneys. You must have seen everything, Isolde said one evening in March, curled up on the sofa with a glass of wine. All those years in law. Did you ever want to be a lawyer yourself? Sometimes, I admitted. But I had Hugh to raise, and paralegal work paid well enough, maybe in another life. It's never too late, she said, and she sounded genuine. My aunt went to law school at 55. Those early months, I thought I'd made the right decision. Hugh seemed happy. Isolde seemed to fit into our family. The house felt alive again, in a way it hadn't since William died. But gradually, imperceptibly at first, things shifted. Small things. Isolde began rearranging the kitchen cabinets without asking, claiming the new organization was more efficient. She moved my coffee mugs, the ones William and I had collected from our travels, each one a memory, to a high shelf I could barely reach. When I mentioned it, she laughed. Oh, Elspira, I thought you'd appreciate the better flow. The everyday dishes should be at eye level. Those decorative mugs are better up high, don't you think? Decorative. As if my memories were decor. She started inviting her friends over. Jessica, Madison, Brittany, young women in their 20s with loud voices and expensive handbags, without giving me notice. I'd come home from the legal aid clinic where I volunteered every Wednesday to find 6 strangers in my living room, drinking my wine, their shoes on my furniture. Elspira, Isolde would call out brightly. We're having a girls' night. Help yourself to wine. There's a bottle in the fridge. In my own home, I was being invited to access my own refrigerator. I began retreating to my bedroom earlier and earlier, like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. When I mentioned it to Hugh, he'd give me that weak smile I was starting to recognize. Mom, she's just trying to make the house feel like home. You know how you can be particular about things. Maybe try to be a little more flexible? Particular. That was the word he used. As if wanting to be consulted about changes to my own home was being particular. Was I being unreasonable? I asked myself at night, lying in the bedroom I'd shared with William for 22 years. Am I too set in my ways? Too resistant to change? I was 63 years old. They were young, building their future. Maybe I needed to be more accommodating, more understanding. So I tried. God help me, I tried. Month by month, comment by comment, the dynamic shifted further. Elspira, don't you think this house is too big for one person? Isolde asked one evening in July, her tone dripping with false concern. We were in the garden, William's garden, and she was looking at the rose bushes with barely concealed disdain. I mean, all these stairs must be hard on your knees. Have you thought about something smaller, more manageable? My knees are fine, I said carefully. For now, she replied. But at your age, you have to think ahead. One of those nice senior communities where you could make friends your own age. Wouldn't that be lovely? Activities, meals provided, no maintenance. Senior communities. She was 45 years younger than I was. No, I corrected myself, 37 years younger. And she was talking to me about assisted living. Another time, over dinner that I'd cooked, she and Hugh exchanged a look I wasn't supposed to see. Hugh and I were thinking, Isolde said, not quite meeting my eyes. Wouldn't you be happier in a smaller place? Maybe a condo? You could sell this house, take the equity, buy something manageable, and have plenty left over for whatever you need. Whatever I need. The implication was clear. Whatever an old woman needs in her final years. I felt something cold and hard settle in my stomach, but I pushed it away. This is my home, I said quietly. I'm not interested in moving. Hugh shifted uncomfortably. Mom, we're not saying now. Just, eventually, to think about. But the seed had been planted, and I could see them watering it, nurturing it, waiting for it to grow into a full-fledged plan. The real shift happened about 2 months ago, in August. I started noticing them whispering, conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered a room. Hugh became distant, avoiding eye contact when I tried to talk to him about anything more substantial than the weather. Isolde's politeness developed a sharp edge, a thinly veiled impatience that made every interaction feel like walking on broken glass. She'd sigh heavily when I joined them for dinner, as if my presence was an inconvenience she was too polite to name directly. I wasn't imagining it anymore. Something was happening, something I couldn't quite see but could feel like a storm gathering on the horizon. The confrontation, or rather, the moment everything changed, came on a Tuesday evening in mid-September. I'd gone to my book club at the library, our monthly meeting to discuss whatever bestseller Barbara had chosen. That month it was The Marriage Portrait, and I'd enjoyed it. Enjoyed the 2 hours of normal conversation with women my own age, women who treated me like a peer instead of an inconvenient relic. I came home at 9:15 earlier than usual because I had a headache. My car made its usual noise pulling into the driveway, the soft groan of the garage door, the click of the automatic shutoff. They should have heard me. They always heard me. But when I opened the door from the garage into the kitchen, I heard voices in the living room. Hugh and Isolde, talking in that particular tone people use when they think they're alone. Not quite whispering, but low, private, conspiratorial. I stopped. Some instinct made me stay silent, made me set down my purse very carefully, very quietly, on the kitchen counter. It's the perfect location, Isolde was saying, her voice carrying that edge of excitement I recognized from when she landed a big client at work. Once we get her out, we can renovate the whole place. Open up that wall between the kitchen and dining room, redo the bathrooms. This house is worth at least $800,000 in the current market. Probably more. My blood went cold. Actually cold, like ice water in my veins. But where would she go? Hugh's voice, quieter, hesitant. But, and this was what broke something in me, he didn't sound horrified. He didn't sound like he was shutting down the conversation. He sounded like he was working through logistics. One of those assisted living places, Isolde said dismissively. There are tons of them. She's old enough. It's not like she needs this whole house. We need it. We're starting a family, Hugh. Do you want our kids growing up in some cramped apartment because your mother is being selfish about a house that's way too big for her? Selfish. In my own home. About my own home. I guess. Hugh trailed off. But she loves this house. Dad planted those roses. Her mom's table. Those things can go to storage, Isolde interrupted, impatient now. Or she can take them to whatever one bedroom she ends up in. Hugh, we've been over this. You're the only child. Eventually this house comes to us anyway. We're just accelerating the timeline, making it work for everyone. Making it work for everyone. Except me. I stood there in my own kitchen, hand pressed against the counter to steady myself, and listened to my son and his wife casually discuss removing me from my home like I was an inconvenient piece of furniture they were donating to Goodwill. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, at the water stain in the corner that William kept meaning to fix, and I thought about everything. Every sign I'd ignored. Every boundary I'd let them cross. Every time I'd made myself smaller, quieter, more invisible in my own home to avoid being particular or difficult. I thought about William, about what he'd say if he could see what his son had become, and I made a decision. If they wanted to play games about my house, about my life, about my future, then I would show them what a woman with 37 years of legal experience could do. I would show them exactly what happens when you underestimate someone simply because they're polite and quiet and kind. I would teach them a lesson about respect that they'd never forget. But first, I needed to plan. Carefully, methodically, with the kind of cold precision I'd learned from 3 decades of legal work, where every word mattered and every piece of evidence could make or break a case. Because I wasn't just defending my home, I was defending my dignity, my autonomy, my right to live the rest of my life on my own terms. And nobody, not even my own son, was going to take that away from me. The confrontation came on Friday evening, October 6th, 2025. I remember the date exactly because that morning I'd received the property tax statement in the mail. $4,863 for the year, paid automatically from my account as it had been for the past 15 years. I'd left the envelope on the kitchen counter without thinking much about it. That evening I decided to make lasagna. Hugh's favorite, the recipe I'd perfected over 30 years of making it for him. Homemade pasta sheets, 3 kinds of cheese, ricotta, mozzarella, and pecorino romano, Italian sausage from Morelli's Deli on 6th Avenue, and my secret ingredient, a 1/4 cup of red wine in the sauce that William had taught me. I spent 3 hours on that lasagna. I wanted it to be perfect. I had this idea, naive I see now, that a good meal might dissolve whatever tension had built up between us. That maybe if we sat down together, if I served them something made with love and care, we could talk, really talk, about whatever was bothering them, about how we could all live together more harmoniously. I'd just pulled the lasagna from the oven at 6:45 when Isolde walked into the kitchen. She didn't look at the food, didn't comment on the smell which filled the entire house with the rich aroma of herbs and cheese and memories. She just crossed her arms and looked at me with those cold blue eyes I'd mistaken for warm just months ago. Hugh trailed behind her like a shadow, like a man being led to the gallows. "Elspira, we need to talk," Isolde said. Her voice was flat, businesslike, the tone she probably used in marketing meetings when she was about to cut a vendor or cancel a campaign. I wiped my hands on my apron, my grandmother's apron with the faded strawberries on it, and tried to steady my breathing. My heart was pounding. I knew. Somehow I knew this was the moment. "Of course, dear," I said, keeping my voice level. "What's on your mind?" Isolde glanced at Hugh, some silent communication passing between them. He gave a tiny nod. Permission granted. "This living arrangement isn't working out," she continued, each word precise and sharp. "Hugh and I need our space. We're starting a family, and we can't do that with you hovering around all the time." Hovering. In my own home. In the house I'd owned for 37 years. I didn't realize I was hovering," I said carefully, fighting to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Perhaps we could discuss—" "No." Isolde cut me off with a single word, sharp as a knife. "There's no perhaps. We've made our decision, and frankly, we've been more than patient. It's time for you to find your own place." She said it like she was doing me a favor, like she was the generous one, giving me time to leave my own home. "There are plenty of rooms for rent in town," she continued, pulling out her phone and scrolling through something, probably listings she'd already researched. "I saw several nice options. Small, manageable, perfect for someone your age. You should start looking this weekend. We'd like you out by the end of the month." End of the month. 24 days. I turned to Hugh desperately, hoping, praying he'd defend me. Tell her she was being unreasonable. Remind her whose house this actually was. But my son, my boy, the child I'd raised alone after William died, just stood there and nodded. Actually nodded in agreement with his wife's demand that I vacate my own home. Something inside me broke and hardened simultaneously, like ice forming over a deep, cold lake. I smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, calm, quiet smile that seemed to confuse them both. I watched Isolde's eyebrows draw together slightly, watched Hugh shift his weight from foot to foot. "I see," I said softly. "Of course, I understand. I'll start looking tomorrow." "Good," Isolde said, relaxing slightly. "That's good. We appreciate you being reasonable about this." Reasonable. What a word. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving my lasagna cooling on the counter. 3 hours of work. 3 hours of hope that we could be a family. I left it there and walked upstairs to my bedroom, my legs steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Behind me, I heard Isolde say to Hugh, "See? I told you she'd understand. Old people are usually pretty practical about these things." Old people. These things. I closed my bedroom door, locked it, and sat on the edge of my bed. The bed William and I had bought in 1995 from a furniture store that didn't exist anymore, and I pressed my palm against the wall. The wallpaper was delicate blue flowers on a cream background. William had joked that it looked like a grandmother's house. "You'll grow into it," he'd teased, and I'd thrown a pillow at him. 20 years ago. Another lifetime. What had I lost? Not just my dignity, though that stung terribly. I'd lost my son, the boy I'd raised alone, worked 2 jobs for, put through college at a cost of $147,000. The man who'd just stood silent while his wife kicked me out of my own home. How had it come to this? I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't sleep. Instead, I went to my closet and pulled out my jewelry box from the top shelf. It was rosewood, a gift from William on our 10th anniversary. Inside, beneath the velvet lining I'd carefully lifted, was a manila envelope I'd placed there 15 years ago and checked on periodically, the way you check on something precious and dangerous. I opened the envelope and pulled out the document inside. Warranty deed, property address, 847 Maple Street, Denver, Colorado, 80220. Grantor, William Thomas Weatherby, deceased. Grantee, Elspira Ann Weatherby. Date, recorded March 3, 2010. Booklet page 2010 0043876. My name, only my name. William had left the house to me outright when he died. I'd never added Hugh's name, despite his occasional hints over the years. "Mom, shouldn't I be on the deed too? You know, just in case?" Just in case. Just in case of what? Just in case he decided to force his mother out? Some instinct had always stopped me. Some small voice that said, "Wait, be careful, protect yourself." Thank God I'd listened. I sat there in the darkness, holding that deed, and I felt fear creep through me like cold water. What if they became violent when they discovered the truth? What if Hugh chose Isolde over me permanently? What if I ended up completely alone, having lost my son in the process of defending my property? But beneath the fear, something else grew. Something cold and calculated and absolutely certain. I had not survived William's death, had not raised a son alone, had not built a 37-year career as a paralegal, working on cases worth millions of dollars, learning every loophole in every law, only to be discarded like broken furniture in my golden years. If they wanted to play games, I would show them what a paralegal with decades of experience could do. By sunrise, I had a plan. Saturday morning, I emerged from my bedroom at 7:30 with red eyes, not entirely faked, and a submissive demeanor I'd spent an hour practicing in the mirror. Isolde was already in the kitchen, making coffee in the French press she'd bought without asking, humming some pop song I didn't recognize. She was wearing yoga pants and a sports bra, her flat stomach on display, making a point, perhaps, about youth and fertility and all the things I no longer had. "Good morning, Elspira," she said brightly, not quite looking at me. "Sleep well?" "Well enough," I replied quietly, setting my laptop on the kitchen table. "I've been looking at listings." That got her attention. She glanced over, her expression brightening with something that looked like victory. "Already? That's wonderful. Find anything promising?" I turned the screen toward her. I'd actually been researching Colorado eviction laws and tenant rights until 4 in the morning, but the screen currently showed apartment rental listings I'd pulled up 5 minutes ago. There's a studio apartment near downtown, I said, letting my voice tremble just slightly. Just enough. It's small, only 450 square feet, but I think it might work for me. It's available November 1st. Isolde appeared at the screen, nodding approvingly at the tiny space I'd supposedly chosen for myself. That looks perfect for you, actually. Cozy. Easy to maintain. The rent is $1,200 a month, I continued, watching her face carefully. I'll need to adjust my budget, of course. Utilities aren't included. Well, you have your Social Security, right? Isolde said dismissively, pouring herself coffee. And whatever savings you have, you'll be fine. Whatever savings I have. If only she knew. When can you move? She asked, sitting down across from me with her coffee in one of my Provence mugs, the one William and I had bought in Avignon in 2008. The listing says it's available in 3 weeks, I replied. I'll need time to pack, of course. 37 years of belongings to sort through. 3 weeks is perfect, Isolde said, smiling that victor's smile. Actually, even better than a month. That gives Hugh and me time to plan the renovations. I've already got a contractor lined up to give us quotes. We're thinking of knocking out the wall between the kitchen and dining room, creating an open concept, much more modern. Modern. She was going to destroy the wall William and I had hung our family photos on. The wall where I'd measured Hugh's height every birthday from age 3 to 18, the pencil mark still faintly visible behind the bookshelf. That sounds lovely, I said softly. I'm sure you'll make it beautiful. Hugh appeared in the doorway then, looking rumpled and uncomfortable. He'd always been a late sleeper on weekends, even as a child. Mom, he said, his voice rough with sleep and something that might have been guilt. Are you okay with all this? I looked at my son, really looked at him. When had he become so weak, so easily led, so willing to betray the woman who'd sacrificed everything for him? What choice do I have, Hugh? I said quietly, letting the hurt show in my voice. Not faked this time. You've both made your wishes very clear. Guilt flickered across his face, but before he could respond, Isolde swooped in. It's for the best, Elspira, she said, her tone dripping with false sympathy. You'll see. You'll probably love having your own space. No responsibilities, no house maintenance. You can join senior groups, take up hobbies. It'll be like retirement. Senior groups, as if I were already 1 foot in the grave, waiting to be warehoused with other old people who'd outlived their usefulness. You're probably right, I said meekly, standing up and carrying my laptop back upstairs. Behind me, I heard Isolde whisper to Hugh, See? She's fine with it. You were worried for nothing. That afternoon, while Hugh and Isolde drove to Boulder to meet with a contractor, already planning their dream renovations of my home, I drove to Best Buy and purchased a Sony digital voice recorder, model ICD PX470, for $59.99. Colorado was a one-party consent state, which meant I could legally record any conversation I was part of without informing the other parties. 37 years of legal work had taught me many things, but perhaps the most valuable was this. Documentation is everything. Then I drove to the office of Jacob Morrison. Jacob had been a junior attorney at Morrison & Associates when I was a senior paralegal there. I'd mentored him, taught him how to organize complex cases, how to find the needles in haystacks of discovery documents. Now he ran his own practice specializing in property and family law, and he owed me more than a few favors. His office was in a renovated Victorian on 17th Avenue, all exposed brick and modern furniture that somehow worked. Elspira, he greeted me warmly when his assistant showed me in. What brings you here on a Saturday? Everything okay? I sat down in the leather chair across from his desk and told him everything. Every detail, the ultimatum, the overheard conversation, the casual cruelty, Hugh's betrayal. Jacob's expression grew darker with each detail, his jaw tightening. They're trying to force you out of your own home, he said incredulously when I finished. Do they even know you're the sole owner? I don't think so, I replied. Hugh knows I inherited it from William, but I don't think he's ever looked at the actual deed. And Isolde, I don't think she's bothered to ask. She's made assumptions. They both have. Jacob leaned back in his chair, pressing his fingertips together in that way lawyers do when they're thinking through a problem. Elspira, this is fairly straightforward from a legal standpoint, he said carefully. You're the sole owner. They're technically month-to-month tenants, though they've paid no rent. You can evict them at any time with proper notice. The question is, how do you want to handle this? I smiled then, that same calm smile I'd given Isolde the night before. I want them to understand exactly what they've done, Isatia said. I want them to feel the full weight of their actions, and I want it to be completely legal and unassailable. Jacob returned my smile. Then we'll need to be strategic. Let me explain what we can do. We spent 2 hours in Jacob's office mapping out my strategy. Every step had to be methodical, documented, legally bulletproof. We need to build an ironclad case, Jacob explained. Not because you need one to evict them, you don't, but because I suspect they'll try to claim elder abuse or undue influence when you serve them with eviction papers. We need to preempt that. He laid out the plan. Week 1, gather all property documentation, deed, tax records, utility bills, mortgage payoff statement, everything that proved sole ownership. Week 2, document their behavior, record conversations legally, photograph any damage or changes they'd made without permission, create a timeline of events. Week 3, secure witnesses, anyone who'd heard their plans or witnessed their treatment of me. Week 4, serve formal eviction notice, backed by overwhelming evidence. Documentation is power, Jacob said, echoing what I'd told him 15 years ago when he was struggling with his first big case. Make them hang themselves with their own words. Monday morning, October 9th, I went to the Denver County Clerk and Recorder's office and requested a certified copy of my property deed. The clerk, a pleasant woman named Sandra Lopez, processed my request efficiently. Beautiful property on Maple Street, she commented, stamping the official seal on the document. You've owned it quite a while, haven't you? 37 years, I confirmed, watching as she placed the certified deed in an official envelope. And I intend to keep it. That document, crisp, official, irrefutable, went into a folder I began carrying with me everywhere. Next, I stopped at Wells Fargo, where I'd banked for 42 years. I requested complete documentation. Mortgage payoff statement from 2008 showing 0 balance. Property tax payments for the past 15 years. $67,341. 0 total, all from my account. Utility payments for 15 years. Electricity, Xcel Energy. Water, Denver Water. Gas, Black Hills Energy. All in my name, all paid from my account alone. The total came to $94,210 that I'd paid to maintain the house since William died. Hugh had never contributed a single cent. They'd been living rent-free for 3 years. At market rate, I'd checked comparable properties. A 4-bedroom house on Maple Street would rent for approximately $3,000 per month. That meant they'd saved $108,000 by living with me. And this was my thanks. Over the next week, I documented everything. The small voice recorder stayed in my cardigan pocket, always on, always ready. Tuesday evening, October 10th, I captured this conversation while making dinner. Isolde, you know what I was thinking? Once this is finally our house, we should turn that sewing room into a nursery. It gets great morning light. Hugh, that room is pretty small. Isolde, we can knock out the closet, expand it into the hallway space. It'll be perfect. I'm thinking soft gray walls, white furniture, maybe a cloud mural on the ceiling. My sewing room, where I'd made Hugh's Halloween costumes every year, where I'd sewn the curtains for his college apartment, where I kept my mother's Singer sewing machine from 1952. Wednesday, they invited friends over without asking, naturally. I stayed in my room with the door cracked open, recorder running. I could hear them in the living room. Isolde's friends, Jessica, Madison, Brittany, and 2 men I didn't recognize. Madison, you guys are so lucky to have this house. The location is incredible. How much do you think it's worth? Isolde, laughing. Well, we'll officially own it soon, probably close to $1 million. Location alone, you know. We're 3 blocks from Wash Park. Jessica. Wait, officially? Isn't this Hugh's mom's house? Isolde. Technically, but she's old, you know. She doesn't need all this space. We convinced her it's time to downsize. Hugh's an only child, so eventually it'll be ours anyway. We're just accelerating the timeline. Brittany. That's smart. My parents did something similar with my grandmother. She fought it at first, but now she loves her little apartment. Isolde. Exactly. Elspira's actually being pretty reasonable about it. She's already looking at places. She'll be out by the end of the month, and then we can finally make this place ours. The casual cruelty of it. The way she spoke about me as if I were already dead, as if my preferences and feelings didn't matter, as if the home I'd built over nearly 4 decades was just an asset to be redistributed to the younger generation. My hands clenched around the recorder. I stopped it, saved the file, labeled it 10/11/2025, Living Room Isolde Friends WAV Evidence. Thursday afternoon, October 12th, something shifted. I was in the kitchen and making lunch when Hugh came in, agitated, his phone clutched in his hand. His face was pale, his jaw tight. Mom, can we talk? He asked, his voice strange. My heart rate increased, but I kept my voice steady. Of course, dear. What is it? He sat down heavily at the kitchen table, running his hand through his hair repeatedly. A nervous habit he'd had since childhood. I was just on the phone with our insurance company, he said slowly. They needed to update our homeowner's policy. We're trying to get better coverage, more comprehensive. I turned from the sandwich I was making, keeping my expression carefully neutral. That sounds wise. They asked for the property owner's information, Hugh continued, looking at me strangely now, searching my face for something. For the deed holder, the legal owner. I said nothing, just waited. Mom, he paused, swallowed. The house is still in your name, just your name. The insurance agent said there's no joint ownership, no trust, no transfer of any kind. There it was, the first crack in their facade. Yes, Hugh, I said calmly, turning back to my sandwich. It is. But I thought... He stopped, confusion and realization warring on his face. I mean, when Dad died, didn't he leave it to both of us? I turned to face him fully. Time to plant the first seed. Your father left everything to me, Hugh. As spouses typically do. The house has been solely in my name since he died in 2010. I've maintained it, paid for it, cared for it alone for 15 years. 15 years, he repeated, his voice hollow. But you never said... You never told me. You never asked, I replied simply. You assumed. There's a difference. His face cycled through several emotions. Confusion, realization, denial, and finally something that might have been shame. Does Isolde know? He asked quietly. I don't believe she's ever asked, I replied, my voice mild. She seems to have made a lot of assumptions. Hugh stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. His hands were shaking. I should tell her, he said, more to himself than to me. She needs to know. I watched him practically run from the room, and I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. This was the moment, the point of no return, no more pretending, no more submissive smiles, no more playing the meek old woman. Let them know, let them panic, let them scramble, because what they didn't know yet, what they were about to discover, was that I wasn't just defending my home, I was declaring war. I heard them arguing upstairs for the next 30 minutes. Isolde's voice rose sharply, then fell to a harsh whisper, then rose again. Hugh's responses were quieter, defensive, the tone of a man realizing he'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. Then came footsteps thundering down the stairs. Isolde burst into the kitchen, her face flushed with anger, her eyes bright with something between fury and panic. We need to talk, she said, her voice shaking. Now. I set down my knife. I'd been cutting vegetables for a soup I no longer had any intention of making, and looked at her calmly. About what, dear? About this house. She jabbed a finger toward the floor, as if she could point at the property itself. Hugh says you're the sole owner, that your name is the only one on the deed. Is that true? That's correct, I confirmed, wiping my hands on a dish towel. I am the sole legal owner of 847 Maple Street. And you were just going to let us think. She stopped, her mouth working soundlessly for a moment. You were going to move out and leave us here? In your house? The accusation in her voice was breathtaking, as if I were the one who'd done something wrong. You told me to find a room for rent, I said evenly. You said this living arrangement wasn't working. I was simply complying with your demands. Hugh appeared behind her, looking miserable, his shirt untucked, his hair disheveled. Mom, he said, his voice pleading, maybe we should all sit down and discuss this rationally, like adults. There has to be a way. Rationally? Isolde spun on him. Your mother has been playing us, Hugh. She let us think this house would be ours. She let us plan renovations, talk about our future here, and all along she knew. I let you do nothing, I interrupted, my voice like ice. I've been living in my own home, Isolde. You've been living in mine. For free, I might add, for the past 3 years. And now you're angry that you can't simply take it from me? The mask dropped completely then. All pretense of politeness, of respect, of false concern evaporated. You manipulative old bitch, Isolde hissed. Careful, I said quietly, pulling my phone from my pocket and making a show of checking it. You're still a guest in my home, and guests can be asked to leave. The next morning, Sunday, October 15th, I found an envelope slipped under my bedroom door. Inside was a handwritten letter from Hugh, his familiar scrawl on lined notebook paper. Mom, I think we all said things we didn't mean yesterday. Let's talk this through as a family. We can work something out that's fair for everyone. You raised me to be reasonable, to find compromise. Let's do that now. Please, I'm your son. Love, Hugh. Fair for everyone. The words rang hollow, manipulative. This was damage control, not genuine reconciliation. I went downstairs at 10 to find them both waiting in the living room, looking remarkably composed. Too composed. They'd clearly spent the evening strategizing, planning their next move. Elspira, Isolde said, her tone artificially warm, all traces of yesterday's venom carefully hidden. Please, sit down. We want to apologize for yesterday. Things got heated and we all said things we regret. I sat in the armchair, William's chair, and said nothing, just waited. Mom, Hugh leaned forward, his expression earnest. We've been thinking, what if we bought the house from you? We could offer you a fair price, and you could use that money to buy a nice condo somewhere. Maybe even have money left over for travel, hobbies, whatever you want. We'd even go above market value, Isolde added quickly, too quickly. Say $850,000. That's very generous, considering the neighborhood. I almost laughed. They'd researched the value. Isolde's comment about $800,000 at the party had been conservative. I'd had the house appraised 6 months ago. According to Keller Williams, 847 Maple Street was worth $947,000 in the current market. They were trying to lowball me by nearly $100,000 while pretending to be generous. That's an interesting offer, I said carefully. Let me think about it. Relief flooded their faces. They thought they'd won. Again. Take all the time you need, Hugh said. We're not trying to pressure you. We just want what's fair. That afternoon, I drove to Jacob Morrison's office and told him about their offer. He shook his head, something like disgust crossing his face. They're trying to legally obtain what they couldn't take by deception. Elspira, you don't have to sell. This is your home. I know, I said, and I'm not going to. It's time to execute the plan. Jacob nodded and pulled out the documents we prepared over the past week. A formal eviction notice, 30 days as required by Colorado law, completely legal, completely clear. Are you ready for the fallout? He asked. More than ready, I confirmed. That evening, I waited until they were both home, together in the living room, watching some renovation show on HGTV. The irony wasn't lost on me. I walked in and placed 2 envelopes on the coffee table in front of them, Official envelopes with Jacob Morrison's law firm letterhead. "What's this?" Hugh asked, picking up his envelope with hands that had already started to tremble. "That is your formal 30-day notice to vacate the premises," I said calmly, my voice steady and clear. "As the sole legal owner of this property, located at 847 Maple Street, Denver, Colorado, I am exercising my right to reclaim my home for my own exclusive use." The color drained from Isolde's face. Hugh opened the envelope and pulled out the official legal document, his hands shaking visibly as he read. "Notice to quit vacate premises to Hugh Thomas Weatherby and Isolde Marie Weatherby. From Elspira Ann Weatherby, property owner, RE. Property located at 847 Maple Street, Denver. CO. Ader2Y. You are hereby notified that your tenancy at the above property is terminated effective November 15th, 2025. You must vacate the premises and remove all personal belongings by 11:59 p.m. on said date. Failure to comply will result in formal eviction proceedings through the Denver County Court. This notice is issued in accordance with Colorado Revised Statutes, paragraph 14 to 40, 107. Dated October 15th, 2025. Signed Elspira Ann Weatherby, property owner, legal counsel, Jacob Morrison Esquires Morrison Law Group. "Mom," Hugh whispered, his face ashen. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious, Hugh," I replied. "You both made it very clear that this living arrangement wasn't working. I agree, so I'm ending it." Isolde stood up, her chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. "This is ridiculous. We're family. You can't just throw us out." "You were prepared to throw me out," I replied evenly. "What's the difference?" "The difference is that we're young." Isolde's voice rose to a shrill pitch. "We have our whole lives ahead of us. You're old. You don't need all this space. This is selfish, Elspira. Incredibly selfish." "My age is irrelevant to my property rights," I said. "You have 30 days. Then came the threats. Isolde's eyes narrowed dangerously. "If you do this, you'll never see any grandchildren. Never. We'll make sure of it. We'll move across the country, and you'll die alone in this house with no one to care about you." The words were meant to wound, and they did. But I'd anticipated this. "That's your choice to make, Isolde," I said quietly. "But it doesn't change the legal reality. You have 30 days. Hugh finally found his voice. "Mom, please, can't we work something out? We'll pay rent, market rate, whatever you want. We'll sign a lease, follow your rules." "No," I interrupted firmly. "You had 3 years to offer rent. You had 3 years to treat me with basic respect in my own home. You made your choice when you tried to force me out. Now I'm making mine." What happened next would haunt me for months, but in that moment, it felt like inevitable justice. Isolde lunged toward me, her face twisted with rage. "You bitter old woman! You're doing this because you're jealous. Because your husband died and left you alone, and you can't stand to see us happy together. You can't stand that Hugh chose me over you." Hugh grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Isolde, stop." "No!" She shook him off violently. "She needs to hear this. You're alone, Elspira. You're going to die alone in this house, and no one will care. No one will even find you for days. That's what you're choosing. Loneliness, bitterness. You're pathetic." I turned and walked toward the stairs, my legs shaking but my voice steady. 30 days, Isolde. I suggest you start packing." Behind me, I heard something shatter. She'd thrown something. Later, I'd find my grandmother's Waterford crystal vase in pieces on the floor. Hugh's voice trying to calm her. "Isolde, please, this isn't helping." "I don't care," she screamed. "She can't do this to us. She can't." But I could, and I would. The next few days were tense and ugly. Hugh left pleading notes on my door. Isolde alternated between icy silence and explosive anger. They stopped cleaning, stopped doing dishes, left messes everywhere. Petty rebellion. One morning I found my favorite teacup, the one William had given me on our first anniversary, shattered in the sink. No accident. A message. Then came Wednesday evening, October 18th. Hugh knocked on my door, his face grave. Mom, can we talk? Please, it's important. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. Isolde's been researching, he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. She found some articles about elder competency, diminished capacity. She thinks she's talking about getting a lawyer, having you evaluated, maybe pursuing conservatorship. The threat was clear. They'd try to have me declared incompetent, take control through the courts, claim I wasn't capable of making my own decisions. I looked at my son and saw a stranger. Tell Isolde, I said calmly, that I've already consulted with Jacob Morrison. Any attempt to pursue that route will be met with a countersuit for elder abuse, harassment, and attempted property theft. I have documentation of everything, Hugh. Every conversation, every threat, everything. His face fell. You recorded us? Colorado is a one-party consent state, I replied. Perfectly legal. I have hours of recordings, Hugh, including Isolde telling her friends that she convinced me to move out, including you discussing renovations to my house before I'd agreed to anything, including threats made against me in my own home. Mom, good night, Hugh. I closed the door. Friday morning, October 20th, I was making coffee when I heard raised voices upstairs. Not unusual lately, but this sounded different, more intense, more desperate. Then I heard something that made me freeze. Hugh's voice, loud and raw. I have money, Isolde. I've always had money. Why do you think I agreed to this insane plan? Footsteps. Isolde's voice. What are you talking about? I have $183,000 in a savings account, Hugh shouted. From Dad's life insurance. From my inheritance. I've had it the whole time. Silence. Then Isolde's voice, dangerous and quiet. What? I told you we were broke, Hugh continued, his voice breaking. I told you we needed this house, needed Mom's house, because I needed you to need me. I thought if you knew I had money, if you knew we could afford our own place, You lied? Isolde's voice rose to a scream. You made me the villain? You made me push your mother out of her own home so you could play the victim? So you could be the good son who tried to stop me? I stood at the bottom of the stairs, my coffee forgotten, listening to my son's world collapse. I was trying to protect us, Hugh said desperately. I was trying to give you the life you wanted. By making me destroy your relationship with your mother? By making me the monster? You used me, Hugh. You used both of us. Then came the sound of Isolde's footsteps on the stairs. She appeared, her face streaked with tears, and stopped when she saw me standing there. You heard, she said, not a question. Yes, I replied. I'm sorry, Isolde whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. He told me, he said you had plenty of money, that you'd be fine, that this house should go to him as your only child. He made it sound reasonable. He made me believe. She broke down completely, sinking onto the stairs, sobbing. Hugh appeared at the top of the stairs, his face pale and defeated. And I understood finally what had happened. Hugh hadn't been weak. He'd been calculating. He'd manipulated both of us, pitting us against each other, playing victim while orchestrating everything. My son was the true villain of this story. Hugh, I said, my voice cold and clear, you have 24 hours to pack your belongings and leave this house. Not 30 days. 24 hours. Mom, please, you manipulated me. You manipulated Isolde. You created this entire situation so you could play the martyr, so you could have what you wanted while pretending to be the good son caught in the middle. That's not... You have $183,000, I interrupted. You could have moved out at any time, could have bought your own home, but instead you manufactured a crisis. You turned your wife against your mother, knowing it would force my hand, knowing I'd eventually have to defend myself, and then you'd look like the victim of two unreasonable women. Hugh's face crumbled. I wanted to keep everyone happy. You wanted control, I said. 24 hours, Hugh. or I'll have the sheriff remove you." Isolde stood up slowly, wiping her face. "I'm leaving too. I'm going back to my parents in California. Hugh, you and I are done. Completely done." She turned to me. "Mrs. Weatherby, Elspira, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but thank you for showing me who he really is before I wasted any more of my life." She went upstairs to pack. Saturday morning, October 21st, I watched from my kitchen window as they loaded 2 separate cars. Hugh's face was blank, emotionless. Isolde looked lighter somehow, despite the tears. Jacob Morrison stood on the front porch as witness, documenting everything with his phone. At 11 o'clock, Hugh walked to the front door one last time. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. I'll be in therapy. I'll work on myself. Maybe someday." "Maybe," I said. "But not today. And perhaps not ever. That's your consequence to live with." He nodded and left. Isolde paused at her car, then walked back. "Thank you," she said simply, "for being strong enough to say no. I needed to see that." Then she was gone too, and the house was mine again. Truly, completely mine. It's April now. Spring in Colorado, and Williams roses are blooming brilliantly, 32 bushes in shades of pink and red and cream. I converted the guest room into a library, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with books I'd always meant to read. The living room is sage green now, the color I'd wanted for years. My sewing room is still my sewing room, my mother's singer still humming when I work on quilts for the women's shelter downtown. I volunteer at the legal aid clinic 3 days a week, helping people navigate housing disputes. The irony isn't lost on me, but it feels right, using what I learned from my own battle to help others. My book club friends say I glow now, that the tension that lived in my shoulders for 3 years has finally released. Hugh sends emails occasionally, short ones, updates on his therapy progress, apologies that feel more genuine each time. I read them, but I haven't responded yet. Maybe I will someday, maybe I won't. I'm learning that I don't owe anyone, even my son, access to me simply because of biology. Isolde sent a postcard from California last month. She started her own marketing consultancy, dating a woman named Sarah. She wrote, "You taught me that boundaries aren't walls, they're foundations. Thank you." I keep the postcard on my refrigerator. This morning I sat on my back porch with my coffee, in my Provence mug, carefully glued back together, the cracks visible but beautiful in their own way, and watched the sun rise over William's garden. My sister Dorothy called. "Any regrets?" she asked. I looked at my house, my sanctuary, standing strong and solid behind me. "Only that I didn't set boundaries sooner," I said. "That I let kindness become doormat behavior, that I confused love with enabling." "You learned, though," Dorothy said. "That's what matters." She's right. I learned that at 63. I'm not too old to fight for myself. That family doesn't give anyone the right to abuse you. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought. That standing alone with dignity beats compromising yourself for company. And I learned that your home, your real home, isn't just a building. It's the boundaries you set, the respect you demand, the life you refuse to surrender. I'm Elspira Weatherby. I'm 63 years old, and this is my house.